And away we go. As I am recording this, I am at least a day or two in the new year, 2026. And oh boy, we're off to a wild start. And I'm not just talking about the New Year's Eve celebrations, which I will get to later. But nonetheless, actually, no, I'll get into the New Year's Eve celebrations now. Where the heck do I begin? There is so much to cover, and not many news outlets are reporting on it. I've only seen such incidences on social media. So I'll start with a few and go along with the rest. So, firstly, as the new year turns about, as we all know, everyone is going to be standing somewhere in their city, observing something, and as midnight strikes, everyone shouts "Happy New Year" in whatever language they're speaking it originally, because I assume that wherever you are, you would mostly likely say Happy New Year in your language, in the country which you're from. Or if you're visiting someone in another country speaking a different language, then that's likely be the few exceptions. Either way, I'm not gonna get in the way of New Year's Eve celebrations for anyone. Celebrate how you want to celebrate. So, until now, I had no idea that how people celebrate New Year's is not from this, and then I don't know what you call that bridge in Sydney or Melbourne, Australia. It's very sad, smoking. And I'm saying this from experience. And I'll tell you now, it may feel good at first, but it's gonna affect you hard, really, terribly, honestly. So back to the Los Angeles billboard displaying smoke-related deaths. So everyone in LA was standing close to the billboard. They're doing the countdown, 10, 9, 8, 7, and so on. And then midnight struck. Everyone in LA shouted, Happy New Year! And then the billboard resets the numbers back to zero. And whilst everyone is cheering that yay, the billboard's reset, eventually, all of a sudden, boom, one smoke-related death just happened at the start of 2026. Like a few seconds after hitting midnight, one death related to smoking has already been recorded. Not based on real-time data, but based on previous patterns, just to clarify how such billboards, statistic-related billboards work. And by the time that one smoke-related death started to display on the billboard, seconds after hitting midnight to start the new year, I saw this car with what seems to be, I wouldn't say it's coffin shaped. However, the person that was driving the car with the neon lights or fairy lights all over the car with the so-called coffin on top is to imply that whoever died relating to smoking was to be that person. I don't want to imply that regarding what I've just seen. However, that is what people would say if you were to ask, what's the deal with the car and this thing on top driving about when the yeah, that's just from my observation. And whilst everyone has different ways of celebrating, and again, I'm not going to get in the way of that. However, I still gonna have my thoughts on stuff on like this. And I would also say that if Eric and Risk were here, they would say the same thing what I'm about to say. What is something to celebrate regarding the refresh of the billboard that calculates how many people die from smoking each year? Why is that a good thing? Why are you celebrating that someone has died relating to smoking? Whilst most people, in their defense, they're not celebrating because someone has died from smoking. Yeah, when I saw that when I saw multiple POVs on the situation on social media, mainly Instagram, I saw a lot of comments saying, "Why are these people celebrating? What has this world come to?" And there was a few that was also laughing at how goofy it is in their perspectives. Which, yeah, I cannot argue with that. And then, yeah, that's all I have to say. I will not get in the way on how people celebrate New Year's Eve. However, even with good intentions, there will come suspicious and questionably dodgy executions at best. People will take things like this the wrong way, just so that everyone's made aware. In my opinion, I don't think that's a good thing. To celebrate turning, I don't believe it's a good thing to celebrate entering the new year outside of statistic real-time-ish Billboard that calculates and shows how many smoke-related deaths has been each year. And then the moment one person, not that it's in real time or not, starts to display that that's how many smoke-related deaths have happened, the first one of the 2026, like seconds after hitting midnight. If there are any, which there will be, but not. I'm not gonna be too hard on those people because I can't say they know any better. That's not a good look. It really is not a good look. In the last few years, when I prepare myself for the new year, I do try to turn a new leaf, and I do try to work on my stress, anxiety, try and ask for help if absolutely needed, and try to keep a level head when reading intense articles like this. And of course, trying to better socialize with other people, which I've struggled for many years. But nonetheless, and I think the same can be said for 90% of the world's population. When you go into the new year, most of the time, if not always, you will slip back into old habits, which is understandable. I understand it's going to happen to people. However, if there are people that are committed to their New Year's resolutions, if you want to get into the habit of positive habits like exercise, what else? Getting your finances or budgeting in check, drink less coffee, smoke less. It's not enough anymore to have determination and motivation to commit to those resolutions. You have to, a lot of people have to figure out what triggers those reactions. What's the trigger that ignites people to go into the habit which they are trying to get out of? And if people do identify the trigger, okay, how can I change what the trigger is? So if I ever if I ever accidentally fall into that habit, what can I alternate with instead? Not sure the exact words from a couple of audiobooks regarding changing of habits, because once you identify the trigger and you know exactly how to use that trigger, then rewire it towards a positive habit that you want to then get into for the new year, all that matters is that you continue doing at least a little bit of exercise each day, reduce how much you drink, and it's not just identifying the trigger, it's also about what is in your sight. Out of sight, out of mind. If you don't see it, you don't think about it. Where could you place such objects that it is easy to view, not just for yourself, but for other people, if they also want to get into that positive habit? That's another aspect. Not more important than the trigger, but it's still nonetheless important to have something within view. So when you walk into the room, wherever that might be, you see it. Oh, okay, I remember now. I'm supposed to make a smoothie because that's one of my New Year's resolutions, to consume healthy fruit, whether it be in juice or in solid form. If you have the motivation and you are determined, that's great. However, that is not enough. To get into new positive habits, you need to find out what the trigger is, what is triggering you, igniting you to get into, which is slipping you back into the bad habits that you're trying to get out of. How can you rewire your mind so what triggers you into a bad habit, then instead it actually triggers you into a good habit, and then having whatever objects or concepts that's associated with your positive habit that you want to get into, it is in clear view from your peripheral vision and your own unique perspective. Because if it cannot be seen and you have to actually go about looking through your cupboards or wardrobes, then that is not helpful. Because if you go home, if you arrive home one night very late and you're very tired, you can't be bothered to go looking about. If whatever is inside of you is nothing related to your positive habit, you're just going to forget about it. Because again, out of sight, out of mind. If you don't see it, you don't think about it. It's simple as that. So yeah. Also, back on more to the celebrations about New Year's Eve and so on. And this is quite unfortunate. And this also ties in more into the hooliganism and public etiquette about how people react in public, and I'm not sure how to describe situations where there's lots of intensity, lots of violence, especially if those lives are lost from that, which I will say rest in peace to those people. In the Netherlands, which I've heard so much that there were young lads and they didn't specify what the identities of those lads are, but even if there are specifications on that, that does not matter. There were young lads in the Netherlands, from what I've seen, into the new year, that during the New Year's Eve celebrations, these young lads they were carrying around fireworks and shooting them at vehicles, civilians, and other public structure. And the thing is that that event has gone so bad, it actually got to a point, and there is a story which I'm going to read to you if I can find it. A Dutch church, a church in the Netherlands, was burned down because of the lads that was causing havoc all over the place. And yeah, okay, I've found the news article. Major fire breaks out in historic church in Amsterdam. On January 1st, 2026, a large blaze erupted at Van Vondelkerk on Vondelstraat in Amsterdam shortly after the New Year and was reported early Thursday. Video from bystanders and 85 indicates the blaze started near the top of Vondelkerk and spread quickly, with parts of the upper section appearing to collapse. Fire crews were seen battling flames as thick smoke spread through the neighborhood, and as of around AM local time, the blaze remained active with a large emergency response on site. Authorities evacuated nearby homes as a precaution, and the Dutch public alert system warned residents to keep away due to heavy smoke and allow emergency services to operate. The building is a neo-Gothic landmark near Vondelpark, completed in 1879 and nearly 150 years old. While officials have not confirmed injuries or determined the fire's cause. Okay, so the summary may not reference the young lads with the fireworks, but nonetheless, I have seen social media posts about young lads in Amsterdam, somewhere in the Netherlands, shooting fireworks at buildings, vehicles, and even civilians. And I'm not going to say that those lads and the fire at the historic church has any correlations whatsoever. But given the timings that these lads were doing the firework stuff, again, not sure how to call it, but it's still pretty dangerous nonetheless. Honestly, I don't think that's too far off in my opinion. This fire at this Amsterdam church could be the case, and pretty much a byproduct of the young lads with the pyrotechnic firework incidents. So I'm not sure how you can get fireworks in the Netherlands. I know for sure that in the UK there are laws about you have to be above a certain age to buy fireworks. If you're below that age, forget it. You're not the cashiers at whatever store that sells the fireworks. They have every right to refuse to sell and ask for payment from young children for them to then buy the fireworks if they plan on doing so. That I know for sure. Not sure what it's like in the Netherlands, but even if there is a particular age limit that if you're under that limit, you cannot buy fireworks. I would guess that the age limit to buy fireworks at a store might be lower than in the UK. Maybe. Besides that, posts on social media have seen of these lads setting off fireworks all over the Netherlands. Even the people don't report how many lives were lost since then. I will say, without a doubt, there would have been people who would have been killed or even injured because of what these lads have done when they've handled the fireworks. It's not okay. And people ask, why are they afraid to go out anymore? And besides what people are saying about immigration and the foreigners, the lads handling the fireworks are still just as big of a problem. Of course, Risk and Eric will also argue about the foreigners that come over to developed countries and may or may not allegedly cause some kind of problems if social media reports on it. This is still an issue. It's very unfortunate that whilst everyone is celebrating the way they want to celebrate, which I'm not going to argue with, everyone should be able to enjoy the moment as it happens. There is, however, there has to be some guidelines set down firmly to ensure the safety and health of other people that are attending such events. And if these guidelines are not put in place, lives will be lost. People will be in hot water for what they have done, and more speculation will spark up about should we let particular people in, should we kick them out, which I'm not going to argue with. However, you cannot blame anyone and everyone just because people of a similar ethnicity to them have caused such problems in public wherever they are around the world. You can't just blame an entire people's group for causing a lot of problems, even if someone of a particular people group or ethnicity has actually done something like it. Again, you can't just blame people of that ethnicity every time. What if by some chance, I'm speaking hypothetically, you come across such people of ethnicity that aren't chaotic, they're not causing havoc, they just want to get on with life. And if there are people like that want to get on with life and they do want to contribute to their local community, let them. I don't have problems with people from all walks of life or backgrounds or wherever they originate around the world that would have come to different countries and contribute to those local communities. So long as they continue contributing to their local communities whilst they understand, for their own safety mainly, that there are particular laws in that country that has to be followed, as well as understanding the culture of that country, not just to prevent people from offending others. It's also it just makes life easier for everyone in that country, so that you have some kind of common ground that you can discuss with other people. Whilst you can embrace the culture of your origin that is completely different to where you are. However, if you're going to another country, whether it be for work or maybe you're just visiting another country, I don't see why not. You can just learn about the culture of that country and maybe learn a few words of their language. I don't see why not. Well, at least you'll learn something and get an understanding of what the world is like outside our own. So yeah, BYD overtakes Tesla as world's top EV seller in 2025. According to its Hong Kong Stock Exchange filing, Shenzhen-based BYD overtook Tesla Incorporated as the world's top EV seller in 2025 sales. Competitive pricing and low-cost ADAS features helped BYD surge overseas with models from $9,555, while Tesla deliveries showed after the $7,500 EV tax credit expired amid Elon Musk, Tesla CEO backlash. Company filings show BYD sold 2.26 million EVs in 2025, while Tesla is expected to deliver about 1.64 million, with 1.05 million deliveries outside China. Following the announcement, BYD shares rose 3.6% in Hong Kong trading after the sales disclosure, reflecting investor reaction, while the Hungary Szeged factory is set to start EV production in 2026. Looking to 2026, China's incentive policy cuts and US tariffs on Chinese EV challenge BYD's overseas growth, as it aims for 1.6 million sales, while analysts forecast Tesla at 1.8 million. And so it begins, the EV selling wars. BYD versus Tesla. China versus the United States. It's, if you think the trade war between the US and China are over, oh no, that's just season 1. Get ready for season 2. But now it's going to be between EV makers of those respective countries to see who will dominate the world in its trade and such and such. And look, I know that a lot of people do not like China for whatever reasons they might have, which I'm not going to argue with. I don't agree with them, but I do understand where they're coming from. I understand why they say this. And I don't argue with them in the slightest for that. However, whether people like it or not, whilst China is a major player in global trade, that global trade dominance from China is only the beginning of China's dominance across the geopolitical world, just like the United States has and currently are for many, many decades. And like many empires, certainly the British Empire before the US took over, it peaks and then it goes down gradually and then it comes to an end. Just like with the British Empire, it had its peak when it had so many colonies all over the world, so much to the point there was a saying, the sun never sets in the British Empire. And then eventually, a lot of these territories and British protectorates have declared they want to be independent or want to have some autonomy from the British. And for the most part, there were times that the Brits were holding on to such colonies, but other times, you know what? They said, we're not going to bother with it. You want your independence? We'll give you your independence. And then the rest was history. And even times where one of the colonies did not want to gain independence and wanted to stay with the British Empire, but of course, another country got involved and said, oh no, we want to do a handover. We want to take this thing for ourselves. And from that moment on, that was the end of what it once was, the British Empire. And then the United States, many years before, was on the rise to become the dominant player in geopolitics. And not just geopolitics, but had a significant trade influence and have always been involved with settling disagreements between other countries. Whilst the United States, as it stands now and will continue for a few more years, everyone is still going to be talking about the United States. But know this for sure. And listen, I don't agree with this as much as anyone else. Mainland China is about to take over. Not our countries will still be independent countries. and sovereign for that matter, and members of the United Nations. However, China's influence is on the rise. And at some point, everyone is going to be talking about China. Question is, how are you going to prepare yourselves for this? Because whatever this is, it is only the beginning. The end is quite distant, as you think it might be. Zohran Mamdani, inaugurated as the 112th Mayor of New York City. Today in Lower Manhattan, Mamdani was sworn in as New York City's 112th Mayor after a midnight private oath in the City Hall subway station, and a public ceremony at City Hall where Senator Bernie Sanders administered the oath. Mamdani ran on a progressive platform focused on easing the cost of living, while his campaign faced criticism from conservative critics and members of the city's Jewish community over past statements on Israel and policing. Taking the oath, Zohran Mamdani placed one hand on, paid the $9 fee to city clerk Michael McSweeney, signed the city ledger, and declared, beginning today, we will govern expansively and audaciously. Tens of thousands of New Yorkers braved below freezing temperatures at City Hall, and a public block party along Broadway's Canyon of Heroes followed Mamdani's 25-minute inaugural address. While Layla Bozorg, deputy mayor for housing and planning, pledged to prioritize housing affordability. If Mamdani succeeds, his leadership could shape the Democratic Party fortunes in 2028, despite national scrutiny from Republicans and President Donald Trump, who said he would cut funding to New York. Yeah, this is quite a shake-up. Surely, this is giving the Democrats a lot of hope for this year. And will it last? Maybe it could last a little longer than what most people would expect. However, there is a Republican president, and he did say, we're not going to give funding to New York City if Zohran Mamdani is to be elected. And whilst people in the New York City administration should be concerned about the chances of funding being cut from the federal level, I think the question New York City they have to ask themselves is, how are we going to get the money to continue funding the welfare programs and maintain the costs of our public transit systems and affordable housing for all New Yorkers? Whilst a lot of local authorities, they rely on private companies and organizations to provide coverage of fundings for projects that these said local authorities want to do in their communities. The reason why moments like that happen, where local authorities are asking for funding from private organizations or other companies, is because the local authorities alone, with the budget they have, it is not enough to fully go ahead with the projects that they want to do. And whilst there's a silver lining for New York City, since the budget is the biggest, not just in the United States, but probably one of the largest in the world. New York City budget is so big. It is bigger than most US states. That's how big the New York City budget is. It dwarfs other states as a whole, and maybe some selected US states combined. It's not even enough to outnumber New York City-wide budget. Whilst New York City has so much money to do the welfare programs, provide affordable housing, and even subsidize local residents, if they plan on doing that, I wouldn't be surprised if they do, at some point, unless there's some other way to get extra funding into the New York City budget. there will come a point that the money that New York City has dries up. I'm not going against the New York City administration. I'm just having my thoughts and concerns about what do they plan on doing outside the proposals that they promised to local New Yorkers. What would happen if the money dries up? Well, I don't blame them wanting to provide for local New Yorkers. There is a cost, not just financially. Actually, it's mostly financial, but there are other costs as well. Like once people realize when people when whoever's in that New York City administration that the money eventually will run short to then continue with the funding for these local welfare projects. And this all ties in with the critics from people with conservative mindsets that I'm not sure which exactly those critics are. However, I know there will be a few of those critics that will point this out. And again, if that's how you want to help New Yorkers, so be it. What I ask is, how, with what money are you going to cover such welfare programs? Where will the money come from to fund whatever projects that you are going to provide for New Yorkers? What would happen if the money that New York City has now eventually runs out? Not it won't, not that it will. What if it does? Well, even with the massive budget that New York City has, which is far larger than most US states, spending all of that money all at once, it's not just reckless or irresponsible, it's also quite dangerous. Because once the money dries out, how are you going to continue funding the welfare programs? Who are you going to call to provide who are you going to call to get additional funds to provide a supportive float to keep such welfare programs on the up? That's all I have to say. That's all there is to say. And of course, Eric Taylor, being born and raised in New York City, he is not a big fan of Mamdani. Personally, I don't blame him. However, the people of New York City have voted for this man, and this is what they'll get. What you vote for is what you get if a huge majority has voted for that person. And in the next few months, they will start to see what Mamdani is capable of and what he can do for New York City. If at any point there are people that do not like what Mamdani is doing, well, they can just leave. They can leave New York City and go somewhere else. It's not like they're caged in, like those 15-minute cities that the conspiracy theorists are talking about. There's still freedom of movement, with whatever freedom of movement is still left. Go to another US state and live there for most of your life. No, you don't have to stay where you are. You can go other place else if you want to. We should be able to live and live life how we want to live life. FTSE 100 breaks historic 10,000 points mark for the first time. The FTSE 100 index climbed above 10,000 points for the first time on the first trading day of 2026, passing a significant stock market milestone. Rising share prices are good news for investors, including anyone with a pension or other savings that are invested in the stock market. The FTSE 100 tracks the performance of the 100 largest companies on the London Stock Exchange, including mining farms, defense firms, and large banks. Wow, good news for investors of the FTSE 100. Someone is going to be making a lot of money out of that if they invested months prior. So yeah, there's at least some good news at the start of the new year. But of course, this is only the beginning. We don't know what's going to happen next. We just have to wait and see what is going to happen next. So prepare yourselves for this. And also, if you are investing or buying on the stock market, think long term. don't just buy low and sell high in a span of a single day, because you never know how much of a difference prices can change every hour, every day, and so on. You always have to think in the long term, not just with investing, but with everything in life, because you never know what's going to happen to you in life, especially what happened in 2020, and we were all stuck in our homes for at least 2 years, or at least an entire year we were stuck at home. Yeah, none of us knew that was going to happen, yet it happened anyway, and world leaders all over the globe have told us to stay at home, only go out if absolutely necessary. Who's not to say something like that will happen again? Probably not, because there'll be a handful of people that will look through the lies. No, not the lies. Okay, maybe not the lies. At least most of them aren't lies. But will be people that will look through the the masks, the smoke and mirrors, the charades, and the execution of how 2020 was handled. And there'll be a handful of people, not everyone, but a handful of them will say, if this happens again, we're not going to comply. And even if something like this was to happen again, it will come with a massive cost. Stock markets will go down. Everyone's going to be stuck at home with limited mobility. Like, when the lockdowns happened in 2020, everything shut down instantly. All the prices went down drastically. And everyone, regardless of how much wealth you have, whatever socioeconomic class you're in, whatever walk of life you've walked, and wherever you are in the world, we were all impacted harshly because of that lockdown in 2020. But hey, that's here and there. What's important is what we have now and what we can do in this moment in time. Swiss ball fire that killed 40 started by sparklers on champagne bottles. Oh boy. A deadly fire broke out at a ski resort bar in Crans-Montana, Switzerland on New Year's Day, killing around 40 people and injuring over 100 others. The fire was allegedly started by sparklers lit on champagne bottles, with the flames spreading and collapsing the wooden ceiling of the bar. Survivors described a crowd surge as people frantically tried to escape, with some trapped inside and suffering severe burns as their clothes melted on their skin. That is awful. Not just the part about the clothes melting to people's skin, but the sparklers being what started the fire, and how many lives have been lost, and how many people got injured from that instance. So, before I go on, I will say, which I usually do because I want to, rest in peace to the 40 people whose lives were lost in the Swiss bar fire. I say condolences to the friends and family of those 40 people. It's very sad, very unfortunate. And now, what I'm about to say may be controversial. I don't want to go there. However, it has to be mentioned. At least something that I've seen regarding the story on social media. I saw it. I was scrolling through social media. I saw a post about the Swiss bar fire and how this person in particular was insinuating that days before the Swiss bar fire happened, Google Trends showed at least 100 search results regarding the Swiss bar fire, like days before it happened. And it's not just Google Trends in general. It's Google Trends search terms coming from Israel. That's the controversial part. Again, I'm not saying that people from Israel are responsible for this. No, in fact, that's giving them way too much credit. And also, who's to say that there aren't Israelis that don't want violence to happen? Again, I'm speaking hypothetically. I'm just saying, can't always just jump to conclusions, even if there is some kind of correlation that is somewhat remotely close to any given events. Not to say correlation creates equals causation, but of course correlation is indication of alleged causation. And I say alleged. Actually, no. No, I can't say that. People lost lives in this. It's very sad. But that's just my perspective on the situation. And even if this person was pointing to the fact that there have been such times in Israel, according to Google Trends, that someone did search up Swiss shooting, Swiss fire something, like days before that happened. That's not to say that particular groups of Israelis and or Jewish people were the ones that orchestrated, or nor were they responsible for this. However, this does raise suspicion. And and again, hypothetically speaking, what if they didn't cause this, and then someone still made the video anyway? I'm just saying, I'm speaking hypothetically and just trying to do devil advocate here whenever I can. But with all that being said, back to the Swiss bar fire that killed 40 people. Rest in peace to those people, and condolences to their friends and family. This is scary times we're living in. And I did say, actually, in another podcast, the Opinionistics, that once we get into January of any new year, a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of shenanigans, so much stuff is going to happen all at once. And if not all at once, a lot of them are going to happen simultaneously within the first few weeks. It's at least something to start the conversation about the new year. Like, oh, if this happened, what if this happened? Again, even how frightening that is, we got to remember, how could this happen? Who was responsible? Could something like this happen again? And if there is any evidence, what could that evidence be tied to? Never stop questioning. If you stop questioning, then the truth will get to you and will bite you in the bum. And no one would like to get their bums bitten. That's painful. And also weird, but mostly painful. No one wants that. Venus Williams is back at the Australian Open 5 years after her last appearance, 28 after her first. Venus Williams, 45, will become the oldest woman to compete in the main draw of the Australian Open. Kamiko Date, who was 44 in 2015. Williams, a 7-time Grand Slam champion, received a wildcard entry and will make her first appearance at Melbourne Park since 2021 after health issues derailed her career. Williams made her Australian Open debut in 1998, defeating her sister Serena in the first of 31 sibling showdowns on the circuit. Wow. What a comeback. I had no idea. Of course, I've heard about Serena Williams, but Venus, it's been a while. Glad to see that Venus is back on the court and giving it her all to the best of her ability. We never know what's going to happen to these people. So long as they are okay, they can pick themselves back up again and continue to thrive in their career. That is what's most important. And that is it for this episode.